What's up, everybody, and welcome into the H&M Trucking Podcast. Would you believe it? We're all the way to episode 78, and this year is melting away through my fingers as we speak. I cannot believe it's already almost October, or it is October. I don't even know what day it is. Thanks for being here for episode 78 today. Appreciate you checking out the podcast. Don't forget to check out our brand new shiny podcast website by heading over to podcast.hmtrucking.com. There's a ton of cool features there. You can access every single episode, both audio and video. You can see little profiles of the guests that we've had on some of those episodes. They're all categorized, so if you're looking for something specific, it's easy to find. Plus, we've also got some of our top drivers listed up there. We will put up the drivers that had the top miles for the month. We'll put up like idle times and things like that. A lot of the same stuff you see in your newsletter, but compiled right there on our website. Plus, if you drivers have pictures that you want to send in, you know, I'm a frequent flyer on the H&M Friends Facebook page. I don't post a lot up there, pretty rarely actually, but I am always checking out your guys' pictures. And if you ever want to send any of those to us, all you got to do is head over to podcast.hmtrucking.com, and you can actually submit your photos right there. We'll slap them right up there on the website. We even got a spot for a pet of the month. So if you're interested, you want to send us a picture of your furry little friend that rides shotgun, we'd love to have it. We'll get all those pictures and pets of the month and all that stuff posted up there pretty frequently. So make sure to head over to the website. It's a really sweet website. Our designers did a fantastic job. These dudes are so good at what they do. It's all like custom, you know, all the coding and everything has all been written from scratch. It's not like a Squarespace or something like that. Like, they built this thing from the ground up, and they did it specifically for the H&M Trucking Podcast. So it's a really cool resource. I definitely want you guys to go check it out. They're watching for clicks over there as well. Of course, we're hoping that more people check out the podcast because they stumble upon the website. But for all intents and purposes, you should head there today. Once again, podcast at hmtrucking.com. So what's up for episode 78? Well, it's a kind of a jam-packed episode because we're getting into a couple different things here. We haven't had a freight market reset in a while. We haven't talked to Tim Krueger and just picked his brain about what's going on out there in the market. Now, Tim, as you know, works for JFL. He is a broker. He's always out there with his finger on the pulse of the freight market. He lives in it every single day. So he's a really good resource to have a conversation like this with. And we're also going to bring on an H&M driver that we haven't heard from for quite a while. Zach Beckman is going to join us for this conversation because we wanted a driver's perspective in on this conversation. And while my awesome co-host Denny used to be a driver, we wanted one that's actually out there in the weeds right now. So Zach Beckman and Tim Krueger will join Denny and I here coming up just around the corner. And following that, we're going to talk about our Samsara safety score. Is it Samsara? I feel like it's Samsara, but I've also heard people call it Samsara, because I know people that spell Sarah S-A-R-A. I don't know. I'm probably going to call it both of those things multiple times during this episode, so just bear with me on it. We're going to talk about the Samsara safety score with Dale Cook, Executive Vice President, and of course Safety Manager Dean Edmunds also joining Denny and I on that break. And really good stuff there. The reason we wanted to talk about that is because in some of our meetings, there was just a little bit of thought that maybe there was some confusion on exactly what the Samsara safety score is actually tracking. And since Dale sets those parameters and Dean is heavily involved being the safety manager, we're going to bring them on and just let them tell you. Denny will have some questions, of course, from his experience with the technology, and I will be making dumb jokes and saying dumb things as I am wont to do. So, big episode, lots coming up, not a lot of time here. Also, at the very end of the episode, Denny and I are going to go through a Reddit post that I found that is hilarious. I absolutely love it. It centers around how you know you've been a trucker for too long, and there's a lot of really funny stuff in there. So, good episode today, lots to get to. I need to clam up and get to it. Here's my interview, and mine and Denny's interview, I should say, with Tim Krueger and H&M driver Zach Beckman.
From Omaha, Nebraska, to whatever lane you're driving, this is the H&M Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Next up here on the H&M Trucking Podcast, it's time for us to talk about the freight market again. It's been a while since we've had him in here, but he's back to hopefully give us some news. We don't know if it's going to be good or bad. I didn't ask him, but please welcome Tim Krueger from JFL. Tim, glad to have you here. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. It's been a while. Been crazy busy on my end, so I'm glad you kind of spaced out a little bit this time. So hopefully I have some decent news this time around.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you here. And another guy that hasn't joined us for a while but is back is driver Zach Beckman. Zach, appreciate your time as always.
Of course.
Now, when we talk about the freight market over the last probably 3 or 4 times we've had this conversation, Tim, it hasn't been good. But I was really excited this time because I was browsing the news this week, and what I did find actually from Freight Waves is that diesel prices may have hit bottom for now in the futures market, but average weekly retail diesel price posted its 10th consecutive decline on Monday. That seems like good news to me, Tim, but talk to me about your perspective. Does the diesel price really even factor into what you do on the daily at JFL?
It does factor in. We do quote, a lot of our customers do have a fuel surcharge on there, so it does price it a little differently. It always helps when we do price on that fuel surcharge size that it does help the truck a little bit more, because you can dedicate it to that. The big thing we're still seeing is a lot of capacity in the market. So, as a broker, I'm still getting the rates that, I would like to see on our side, probably not what you're wanting to see on the truck side. Is the big thing I'm still seeing. The big one on as far as a hopper market goes that not a lot of people look into or anything like that right now is corn harvest. So a lot of my farmers I work with, a lot of owner ops who just kind of stay busy and do hopper work throughout the winter, I don't have access to. So right now, Illinois is a big, corn harvest state, and I can't get any of my Illinois stuff moved. So it is affecting me a little bit, but as far as diesel prices go, it's always good seeing those go down. It does help with, the cost of the truck and moving the truck and everything like that. So, it's a good sign to see diesel and fuel costs go down. But I don't know if that has a big thing with an election year and that whole thing gets brought up. So always on a truck side, when you see diesel prices decline, it's always good.
And I imagine a guy sitting in your position scratches his head a little bit when you've got all this capacity in the market, but you can't get something moved in a certain region. Obviously, you've identified the issue. It's harvest season. We know that out in the Midwest. Tons of agricultural materials moving around. But how do you go about solving that if you're having trouble in a certain region like that, Tim?
So kind of in a region like that, it's, a lot of transparency with your customers. So, I can have an excuse of, hey, it's harvest. I can't get trucks routed there. A lot of my capacity is going to corn harvest and moving corn for like Frito-Lay, they have a ton of acreages out there that go straight into their plant in Illinois. They'll also pull out of Gothenburg, Nebraska, and out of those parts of Nebraska as well. But kind of how I do that is just, have that transparency and say, hey, this is going on. I can't cover for, the freight rate that I have currently. Is there any way we can pay a little more during this time so I can bounce trucks from other states, which helps a ton. But some people are like, no, you've, decided to dedicate at this rate. This is the rate you have. And then it's just I take a loss and kind of ebb and flow with my market and see where I can take a loss to actually help still move the freight. There's been plenty of times where I pay out of my pocket to move a truck and give the truck what it needs and what it wants, So, if a driver's like, hey, I need this to bounce that far, if I'm in a pinch, I pay it. It's kind of the cost of doing business and how we do it. And I just tell my, customer, it's like, hey, if you want me to move this anymore this month or until capacity comes back for me, I got to be at this rate. But, if something I have contract, through a customer, it's just part of doing business to where, as long as I'm on the sliding scale to where I make my margin and what we need to stay operating, if I take that loss for a couple months or two, so be it. But that's kind of how that process works.
And that's nothing that all the other brokerages out there aren't dealing with too. They're all playing that
Correct.
exact same game. It's just about how well they can play it. And
Yep.
So, Zach, I want to bring in the driver's perspective here. From a diesel price standpoint, I know about H&M's Fuel Solutions. Obviously, you guys are pretty well dialed in there. But have you been seeing lower diesel prices just as you drive by truck stops and gas stations recently? Has that been something that's even made it into your lexicon over these last couple of weeks?
It all depends on what part of the country you're in. You'll obviously notice the closer you get to the coast and everything, the more expensive it tends to get. I've noticed obviously closer to Nebraska and Iowa and stuff like that, you will notice it gets cheaper, but it is the pretty typical expensive toward the coast. And from what I've been seeing, it seems the lower areas, like Nebraska, Iowa, and a handful of the neighboring states, it seems like it's hovering upper 2s, low 3s, and then the closer you get to the coast, it's pushing 450, and much to your earlier point, and I'm sure it has something to do with it. It probably is, the election year playing into it, but it does seem to have gone up a little bit since it dropped earlier and it seemed to hit its low. It seems like it's kind of fluctuated up a little bit again, just kind of held where it's at, much like a bunch of other things, kind of waiting to see how November plays out is my guess. But it is kind of holding steady for now, at least.
And what kind of sentiment are you getting from other drivers out there on the road if you're talking to them as far as the market itself is concerned? What's the sentiment out there? Are drivers holding out hope for things to turn around? Is everybody pretty dejected? What do you see?
So obviously I'm not on the Facebook one anymore. I can't see what people are saying from there. But from what I have been hearing is there's a bunch of drivers moaning, groaning, complaining that freight rates are too low and expenses are too high, which it is definitely obvious. I have noticed, and be it here at H&M, some other companies, the smaller the company, the more this is going to affect them. But the wait time between loads has been increasing. Me personally, I haven't had too many bad situations, but there have been. If I'm not unloaded and gotten a load by a certain point in the day, that's most likely a wash for me. But at the same time, there's been, I wait for an hour, it gets right at that time frame, then they get me something, and hey, I gotta get moving. But something I have noticed is, nobody's really wanting to pay the freight rates because, unfortunately, everybody seems to be broke. And expenses and everybody's overhead is a lot more than it used to be right now. So everybody's trying to find that happy median. But I have noticed a handful of our other drivers will sit there and complain, oh, why am I waiting so long, this, that, and the other. And it's like, well, in order for our trucks to move, unfortunately, our trucks are a little more costly because, we're a smaller company. We can't operate like Warner, CR England, Schneider, Swift, any of them that can take a load at a loss on a regular basis because they got another, 1,000 or 2,000 trucks that are making up for it in the meantime. We can't quite do that over here. And to those drivers that don't understand it, if they get a chance, I would recommend taking a look at a load board. There was somebody told me about one. There was 800 miles going from, I believe it was Washington down into California, and fuel rates out there god awful, and the load was 44,800 odd miles. They were paying like $800.
Wow.
So driver wasn't going to make any, the driver would have had to operate at a loss. And to an extent, there is an understanding. Yes, sometimes you got to take a load at a loss in order to get down into a better freight zone. But, so from what I've been hearing, a lot of these, it's starting to become a little more common than it should be. Mm-hmm. And I believe also part of that is, I'm trying to find the nicest way to say it, but we are definitely seeing a change in the type of individuals driving trucks, and they are able to operate their living expenses at different costs than what your typical American would be able to do it at. So there's, politics unfortunately involved in that, but it's mix and match with how good or bad it is. It kind of depends on where you're at and the time of year. Right now, another great one is construction season. So, we got Pella being one of our biggest ones, all the apartments and everything being built. Those ones are moving on a regular basis.
Right.
So it also kind of depends on the season and where you're at. Depends on what you might get. So.
Yeah, I totally get that. Denny, Zach touched on something there that I really want your input on. During your driving career, was there ever a period of inflation such as we're having right now where it really started to affect kind of your finances, and that you were spending more on food, you're spending more on fuel, you're spending more on vet care for the dog or personal care for yourself, and you were really seeing a difference at the end of the month because of how high inflation was? Did that ever happen to you while you were driving?
Well, of course, everything ebbs and flows. It's cyclic, so you have good years, and that's why I encourage drivers when they bitch about, their paycheck this week or this month. The only way I could personally make sense out of it was to average a year, no less than 6 months, and see what I'm doing weekly on a long-term basis, because you're going to have, like, for instance, now should be, if it's not already peak season, coming up on peak season, and then into February or so is when it generally slacked off some. It always amazed me that it didn't slack off immediately after Christmas, but for some reason it would seem to carry over and through January, maybe into February, and then you got a month or so where it's rates down again. Tim's shaking his head, so I guess I'm right on that.
You are right.
Again, you're gonna have good weeks, you're gonna have bad weeks. You have to average it out and figure out what's good and what's bad. Somebody touched on something a few minutes ago that I shake my head. I have since I was a teenager, and I joined the Marine Corps and left the state of Texas for the first time, and it always baffles me that Texas, Louisiana is where all the refineries are, but we seem to pay more for fuel here than people in the Midwest, and they have to make it here, ship it up there, and they're paying less. How is that right?
Boy, I wish I had an answer or at least a joke for you, but I don't have anything, Denny. Maybe Tim's got some thoughts on that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I've never been in the fuel, freight side and how it moves, so I actually can't give, touch base on that. But, a couple of things, when you're running, I can't remember who brought it up, but you're running Oregon to, California, fuel's expensive up there. Permits are expensive up there. You get to these expenses now on a truck side, insurance is up. The cost of trucks up, trailer prices are up, it's all these are up, but then freight costs drop. And I don't know who's keeping some of these guys around who got in when it was hot during COVID, but, I don't know how none of these guys are, going for bankruptcy or anything like that. Like, it kind of blows my mind. Like, I got asked to move Georgia to California at $1.10 a mile. And I told my customer, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not touching it. I don't even want to deal with it. Like, I'm not going to pay someone that cheap of a rate to just go cross country. Like, it's not worth it to me. Since we are owned by H&M, we quote what a truck needs. And I get turned down a lot right now because all these brokers are coming in lower and lower and lower. And I'm not going to do that. I want to make sure the truck's good. The truck and the driver are making the money they need to stay profitable. Like, if it's not worth it, we're all making money on the right way, it's not worth it. You kind of see these things, and I think you're starting to see a small uptick too on market side. Obviously harvest season, you're going to see hoppers moving a little better. Peak season's right around the corner here. Halloween candy's probably already moved in, and we already see that. You see this come in, but, I don't think we're really going to see a good uptick till probably next year, Q1, Q2. But you are starting to see more capacity leave. I check freight waves all the time of who went bankrupt and who's filing for this. And, when you start seeing brokerages go out, you're starting to get a little scary. We're getting, on my side, we're getting more and more action. We're getting customers we never thought would reach out to us. And they're like, hey, can you help us now? Like, so you're going to see a move. I think we just got to be a little more patient, and you're going to see it turn around here. Hopefully Q4 would be great, but I don't think it's going to happen till next year, early next year.
Well,
what
it's
about
always
this
good
port strike I'm hearing about?
Up in New York, New Jersey. I was going to bring that up today. I didn't know about it until Tom Woods. You guys know him very well. He brought it up to me, and I was like, oh, I haven't had time to check freight waves because I was doing a 2,200 lane load for produce, for pumpkins and everything for next year. And he's like, hey, did you hear about this? And I was like, no. But yeah, they're planning to strike. They're saying that port, if anything is on a vessel by September 30th, they will get it offloaded. But anything after that, don't expect it to happen.
I was even hearing it may stretch into the Florida ports in the Gulf, too.
Oh, really? I haven't heard that. I just heard New York, New Jersey today.
Wow. Well, that could be, that could have a...
East Coast.
You heard East Coast, Zach? Is that what you said?
I I just heard in general that there was going to be a strike of the port workers on the East Coast. I didn't hear specific states, but that's a little unfortunate because I happen to be in Florida.
Yeah, and just looking at the things we're talking about, and I'm trying to put this together with kind of a rudimentary understanding, so understand that going in. But what I'm hearing is, all right, freights or the ports are going to strike. That means that after September, you said September 30th, was it, Tim?
Yep.
After September 30th, there's not going to be freight coming from those ports that needs to get on trucks and move. Couple that with the fact that you've got plenty of capacity in the market right now. We're going to see some more trucks sitting here in the coming months if this strike actually happens. Is that correct?
Correct.
Man, that's a bummer. Well,
yeah.
We'll keep you updated on it as much as we see. That's actually the first that I had heard of it. So I'm glad you brought it up because I was just going to, talk about Coyote Logistics exiting the market. Obviously, RXO was the one that completed buying up that whole thing. And so that I don't even know how big that makes RXO at this point. But from what I understand, Coyote was like UPS. And so
Coyote Logistics. I've had a couple of them. I know somebody else that's had a couple of them. A majority of those customers, when you were dealing with Coyote Logistics, a bunch of them were, needless to say, a waste of our time on the clock for drivers. They took their time at the unload. Somebody I know and somebody that's been on the podcast, he first got over here, and before he had his hazmat and tanker endorsement, he had the misfortune of dealing with Coyote Logistics, and yet needless to say, he was hollering at me saying, I said this is a good company, this, that, and what's going on here is like, hey, get your hazmat and your tanker, it'll take care of all of that. And then sure enough, it's been few and far between, but I know a few people that have had the misfortune of getting Coyote Logistics, so I'm not wishing bad on Coyote Logistics and the people there, but good riddance. Thank God.
Well, I was going to say, it doesn't really matter what you wish on them. I think their gravestone's already set up in the field there. It sounds like RXO paid $1 billion for that acquisition too, so it's no small turkey there. Tim, I saw your eyebrows raise.
Yeah. Well, I think UPS paid $12 billion for them.
Oh,
yeah. So if you really think about it, RXO got a pretty good deal.
Yeah, there's a winner and a loser in every deal, isn't there? Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I can't remember when UPS bought them, but they've been around forever. And now with RXO, and it's tough dealing with like guys like me who are a small brokerage. We have like 9 employees, so it's like, how am I going to compete with that? Like, I just gotta do everything I can. So it's. You see these guys get bought up every now and again, and it just makes it difficult on my side.
Do you see smaller brokerages get bought up by these big companies, or is it only something where, because right now I'm seeing in this article that RXO, it says, was built on small carriers. Once integrated, their entire platform will have 150,000 carriers providing capacity. Is that something that happens to a brokerage the size of JFL very often, or is that only somebody that's gone as large as Coyote that's getting swallowed up by these big companies?
You'll see. I mean, we got asked by God, who is it? Someone in town offered to buy JFL, and we declined. Thankfully, I wouldn't want to go work for anyone else. So, so every now and again you see it, but normally you'll see like 100-person, 200-person brokerage get bought up first. And all they're doing is buying your book of business. That's all it's worth to them. They'll integrate their own, capacity, all their own stuff, get your lanes when you're customers. And that's kind of how it goes. If that's what some brokerages are trying to do, great. And people want to, buy out and get their paycheck and leave. We're here to help H&M. We're here to be a sales force and a driving force to bring in freight for you guys and try and do that as best as possible. We're trying to get chemical companies in as much as we can. And, even if someone's like, oh yeah, we want assets. Well, here you go. Here's Ken. Here's Brian. Here's Scott. Like, here's those guys. Like, they'd love to price things out for you. Few and far between, you see the smaller ones get brought up. But if they get big enough, like I said, 100 employees to 200, they'll get bought up pretty quickly.
Sure. Especially, I imagine, if they have an efficient business model and they've got a bunch of good employees, those types of people are valuable. Well, it's interesting, man. We've talked about this, as I said off the top. We've had this conversation 3 or 4 times now, and Going back to August of last year, I remember was the first time we had the conversation, and we all sat here and thought, listen, we thought it was going to be August. It's not August. Now we're looking at January. January is 9 months in the past, and we're looking at January again. What good news, Tim? What good I guess, predictions or predictors in the market are you seeing right now that's making you feel like we are actually headed for a turnaround? Is it the capacity exiting, the fuel prices dropping? I know that doesn't have so much to do with it, but what other little predictors are you looking at right now that are sort of making you feel positive about next year?
When your bigger carriers start turning down freight and rejecting loads. So there's usually a rejection, that gets put out, I think, weekly. And if it gets up to 8, you're seeing a good freight market. I think it's been, I haven't checked recently, but I think it's at a 5 or a 6 right now. So you're starting to see it uptick, which is good. The more you see the big guys reject loads and turn them down, the better it is for, the likes of H&M and the rest of us. It gives us all a shot. So you're seeing that, on a day-to-day operation like myself, like I'm in the market day-to-day. Like I see it every day. So when I find it tougher to cover my loads and tougher to find trucks, that's when I know that freight market's turning a little bit. And I'm seeing that on, like I said, a hopper side, but harvest has a lot to play with that. But hopefully we have a good peak season. I think last year was a pretty bad peak season. You didn't see a lot of freight moving, but I think hopefully that switches up a little bit. With the whole port strike, that could affect a lot, especially if there's not loads coming in. People aren't getting the products they need. Who knows what's going to happen with that. So, you always see rail strike. It seems like you close your eyes, you see another rail strike. I haven't seen a port strike in a good while. So we'll see how that plays out. But like I said, tender rejection is a big one. When you see, Warner believes too, like they're going to see a big turnaround, probably Q1, Q2. Kelly, she's one of my logistics specialists here on the customer side. Her ex-husband's mom works at Creek Carriers. She said Target, Costco, Walmart, and Sam's all tried to cut their freight rates by up to like 40 to 50%.
Wow.
So Warner, Creed, they all were like, yeah, we're not doing that. So thanks. So we'll see if that holds true, if that's even true. But I heard that and I was like, there's no way. But, they're trying to cut freight wherever they can and freight cost. And for some reason, when they're trying to move their product, it always comes to the freight side for some reason. Hey, it's like, where's my truck? It's like, where's my product? Well, it's like, you paid me $1.05 to move the load. I can't even keep my truck moving, and
yeah.
so, and they want the best fleet, they want the best equipment, but they want to pay, guys who have, 3 flat tires and duct tape on the back of their trailer and holes in the trailer. And it's, you can't have your cake and eat it too. We've been getting kicked hard enough for the last 2 years. Help us out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't know about you, Denny, but this port strike timing thing kind of has me thinking about getting my Black Friday shopping done this week because you waited
Amazon
out.
Amazon Prime's coming up the 8th, I think.
There you go, Prime Day. All right, that's a good idea. I'll be looking out for that.
Hey Tim,
Zach,
I've got a question or a thought.
Yeah,
and I've never run this, but it occurred to me, I guess, when the decision was made to shut down the Southeast Regional, and I thought, well, would LTL be a way to go? And I don't know the ins and outs of how that works. I know from a driver's standpoint, I would be sitting there waiting to get in the door, and I'd see LTL trucks run in, back up, get unloaded, and leave. I'm thinking, from a driver's standpoint, that's a good thing. Yeah. But I don't know as far as what you make on it and if it's worth the hassle. I assume y'all have addressed that or discussed it at some point.
Yeah. So my side, I'm going to be honest with you, I hate LTL. It's not fun to deal with. Because, you're picking up one pallet from, let's just say, Georgia. And then they're like, hey, that pallet needs to go, up to PA. Well, now I got to stop maybe 200 miles down the road, pick up 2 more pallets. Then I got to stop 100 miles down the road, pick up another pallet, like to get a full truckload. So that one pallet, they're like, cool. Like, yeah, you're going 800 miles with it. I'll pay you $200 just to move this one pallet. So you're going to have to coordinate 9, 10, 11 different stops just to make that full truckload to make it work. So it's a lot of headaches. It's a lot of like trying to find small places and things to pick up and having the customer base to do that. It's just a headache and it's a lot to deal with and it's a lot of managing. And so I just kind of stay away from it.
Yeah,
It kind of sounds like the gooseneck trucks, honestly.
Yeah.
when you start breaking it down. That sounds a lot like what the gooseneck trucks do as well, because you'll see a few videos of them pop up every once in a while. Oh, I'm picking this up and this up and this up and this up, and this one goes here, 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 and here, and they're like, oh yeah, the entire shipment on this trailer is worth X amount of grand, and it's like, yeah, but then you got to account for, you've got to go here, 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 make all these appointments on time, make sure everything works. Yep. And on top of that, you've got, with a gooseneck, it'll be a little bit easier, but, in, out, get unloaded versus with a full 53-footer, you're potentially hoping for a dock. You're hoping that the product is in the right spot so the other customer can get to it, so on and so forth. So I can see the up and down of that one, but the trade-off is definitely going to be the amount of time sitting in the door, potentially still. You add that up over multiple customers, that could add up quick. I could see that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that price does work too. But then you also have some customers who would be like, "Hey, pick up this pallet. It can't be around these other products, and it can't be around this stuff. And if you do have those products, I need a wall up. I need this." And it's just like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Well, that was what I was thinking about, is just the logistics of making sure that that pallet is accessible when you're at that receiver. I mean, it could be that you got to unload a whole truck to get one pallet and then load it back up. And my guess is the guys at the dock probably aren't too excited about doing that for all of your other products. They're only worried about that one pallet that they need. It's on you for the rest of it, I would assume. Yeah. Which,
and much like, if we're at a customer, a great one that we have, for example, is down in Texas. I believe it's either Houston or Dallas, one of the two. But we have a customer down there that we pick up empty barrels from, like the empty drums. Much like that, I can imagine the same thing applies. People don't want to touch somebody else's product for fear of damaging it and then having an insurance claim and the whole this, that, and the other. Yep. Much like we can't, it is highly advised, and again, I believe against company policy for us to be, hooking up to somebody else's trailer. But, and then, in that case, we as the truck have to go get the yard dog, which good luck finding them sometimes. So I could imagine the same thing probably applies to that product. Ain't nobody want to touch anybody else's product for fear of getting in trouble.
Right. So it's like being a junior high student and having the girls all around. It's like, man, I don't want to touch them yet. Like, give me one or two more years. I might be really interested in this, but right now, man, it's nothing but Legos and Hot Wheels. So, interesting.
I've never heard boobs in 6th grade. I was ready.
Oh man!
Sounds like a good bear time.
Yeah, well, you had to be careful with Denny too. He's a runner, so he could chase after him for a while if they weren't giving him the time of day.
Runner.
Yeah, but that endurance, Denny, right?
You gotta wear him out. Gotta wear him down, right?
It's just the same way when I chase elk, man. I'll get them over 3 or 4 of these draws. They're gonna tire out sooner or later. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you all. I want to bring it here kind of full circle for final thoughts. And Denny, we haven't heard a lot from you today. I know we've kind of been getting the thoughts from Tim and Zach here, but anything that's been bubbling up in your mind during this conversation you want to leave us with before we let these guys go?
No, and thanks for clearing up the LTL thing. In my mind, I was thinking more like you'd go to say an XPO warehouse and they would have all these things and they'd load them in order and you just make a bunch of stops. So I learned something today. Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
The only other question I would have is, while I was looking at, freight things and what was down and, doing a little research before we came on today, something popped up that said Uber Freight. What the hell is Uber Freight?
That's where he calls Zach and it's where he calls Zach and he comes by in his F-250 and picks up your moving boxes and takes them to the next place.
So Uber Freight is we also are allowed to work with Uber Freight. They're a lot like a CH Robinson. They're like an RXO, XPO, all them. They'll sign on contractual customers that will basically then in turn run like your RFP, run your freight, get freight pricing, do all that for them. I remember when Uber Freight first came up, I was at a brokerage called Zengistics down in Austin, Texas, and they had so much money on the backside from like Uber, the actual like taxi service that you get on your app. That's the same company. They have so much cash flow on the backside that they were taking freight rates at dirt cheap prices when it shouldn't be dirt cheap prices and winning customers. And then they built that all up on the back end, and now they're this big conglomerate that's doing your RFPs, doing your customers. Like I'm trying to get set up with one of them on for Fleet Farm, because we're opening that Fleet Farm in Omaha. And I was like, we can drop trailer from Wisconsin down to Omaha for that whole store. Like, let me know. So, it's one of those like Uber Freight sides that they do a lot of RFPs, they work with customers, and then they basically will broker their freight out to asset carriers or brokers. So it's kind of how that works.
Well, boo on them for taking the dirt cheap rates, right? We can say that even if you do end up working with them and everything's good in the future, boo for that decision.
Yeah.
2 thumbs down from the H&M Trucking Podcast, if that means anything to you.
Yeah.
Tim, any final thoughts for us before we let you go?
Once again, Denny and Marcus, thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate talking to you too. And, as far as freight market goes, we still just have to hang in there, unfortunately. And, we're doing everything on our side to, bring in more customers, bring in more freight for you guys that works for, your rate per mile. And that makes sense for, the type of trucks we have and the drivers that we have and the service we provide. So we hold strong to that. Like I said, just keep on moving. We're doing everything we can to help drivers, to help pay, to, get the miles you need to make sure you're getting the pay you're getting every single year. So we're doing everything on that side. So just keep it at it.
You can tell JFL's working hard over there, and Tim, you're a large part of that, because I know it's not a big staff. So appreciate the time. It's always good to get you here on the show. And H&M driver Zach Beckman, we appreciate your time as well. Anything for us before we let you go, Zach?
So probably my biggest thing would be two factors. One, be patient. I know we all want to sit here, moan, groan, bitch, and complain about it. Me too. I've seen a little bit of a drop here and there in my mileage with it, but it is what it is. It's trucking. But with that being said, I would definitely, as my biggest recommendation, and I'm not trying to be the Debbie Downer here, the doom and gloom guy, but my biggest advice right now would be, everything considered, regardless how November plays out, regardless of how this strike may play out, be careful with your money. Hold on to it a little bit more. Make sure you get some savings set aside. Be a little more attentive in your planning and your spending, because we could sit here and talk till we're blue in the face and say, yes, it's going to turn around on day X, but in the meantime, people have got to get there. So be patient, save your money some more, spend, frugally, be a little bit, tighter with your money. Don't go spending it on silly things, and I'm on my home time. I've got my RCs I'm wanting to spend every little penny on right now, but that would probably be my biggest advice right now is, it is a waiting game. So make sure you got the money set aside to make sure, in the event something happens, you're not caught behind the 8 ball. That would be my biggest advice right now.
Well said.
Hold out hope, sure, but, be mindful and be realistic about it too. So.
I know you said that you didn't want to be Debbie Downer, but you just made me feel like I can't go out and spend all my money on golf right now, and the season is leaving, Zach. So it's very good advice from somebody that's living it right now. And Denny, you mentioned before about doing those long-term averages year over year rather than week over week or month over month. Yeah, that's really going to give you a better snapshot and probably help you sleep a little bit better at night, because, listen, we look at week-over-week numbers on this podcast sometime, and let me tell you, I don't want to be sitting with management when we do. But when we look at it month over month, things look a little bit more manageable. So great advice there from you, Zach. Great advice from you, Denny. Tim, the knowledge and expertise is always welcome here on the show. We appreciate all you guys, and we'll get you back in here soon. Zach, you stay safe out there on the road. And Tim, make sure your coffee's not too hot at the office, okay?
Yeah. Hey, Jackson makes it every day, so you got to tell him that.
Okay, we'll do it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, appreciate it.
No problem.
Joining Denny and I next here on the H&M Trucking Podcast, we've got Executive Vice President of H&M Trucking, Dale Cook, on the line. Dale, always glad to have you here. Thanks for being here today.
A pleasure again. You bet.
And I've also got safety manager Dean Edmunds on the line. Dean, we appreciate your time as well.
Oh, I enjoy doing this. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you guys are here, too, to clear up a little bit of confusion for us. In a recent meeting I had with Eve and Sherry, it was mentioned that maybe there was a little bit of confusion around the Samsara safety score. And she had told me that just things that she had heard in passing from some drivers kind of suggested that maybe they didn't totally understand exactly what this Samsara safety score is looking for. And we figured, we already talked about the freight market today, but we had some extra time in this episode, and it seemed like a really good reason to get you guys on to address this and maybe clear the fog a little bit. So, Dale, I'll start with you here. When you hear that there's a little confusion over the safety score, does that surprise you, and what's your response?
No, it doesn't surprise us a bit. I mean, to be honest, there's a little confusion on the safety score here, too. This has been a learning curve for us. When we first started with Samsara, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? So we had a lot of our settings were just set on the default or the initial settings that were there. But the artificial intelligence, the ECM from the tractor, that's transmitting that information about speed and other type factors, we had a lot of tweaking to do. Initially, Dean and I looked at, I kept looking at following time violations where it's showing on the camera where the driver's trailing the vehicle in front of it, and it seemed like there's plenty of space. But what we found out is sometimes the cameras were not adjusted exactly to the sight line or to the horizon, and that made a difference, and they'd be getting false readings. So we spent a lot of time dealing with that and getting to the point where we feel like we've got it dialed in. That's when we started talking about the scoring itself. We've had consistency, but it's always been skewed in the favor of the driver. In other words, we had a lot of A and B plus type students that probably should have been getting a C all along. So what we wanted to try and do was change some of the factors, the impact of different types of speeding, whether that be light or moderate or heavy or severe, whether we get any type crash events or forward collision warnings, all those factors. We started making adjustments, trying to make a proper bell curve so we could grade these drivers more properly. So when we make these changes, which I think we intend to do next week sometime, everybody's score is going to change. So that you think there's confusion before, well, there'll be confusion when all of a sudden a guy who was a 90 becomes a 50. Well, he was a 90 because we weren't dinging him for the things he was doing, or we didn't put enough weighting on a particular type item. That's where Dean has worked really hard to figure out where those things are, and we're going to talk a little bit about the scoring. But our goal is really to change our methodology so that we aren't rewarding drivers unintentionally by saying, hey, you got a good score, and they don't think they need to improve, and every driver needs to improve. We maybe got a couple, Dean, that don't need to improve, but most of them need to improve. But it's going to help us better identify those drivers and who's got questionable behavior. So, those changes that we really want to focus on, though, because of our CSA scoring is speed. We get too many speeding tickets. Our unsafe driving category, we fight that all the time. And Dean's underlining one here right in front of me right now is that, 97% of our fleet has had a 15 or plus speeding going down the road that we're measuring, okay? 97% of the drivers. That's over a month, right, Dean?
Yep.
In 1 month's time, all of them have got at least 15 over. We'd like to curtail that type of behavior, and guys getting the poorer scores are the ones we can do the coaching, do a little retraining. Sometimes just showing them the videos of what they're doing makes such a huge difference. They don't think they did anything wrong, and then you show them the video and they go, oh crap, I did too, right? So that's kind of been our intent. Dean can speak to a little bit about, how we want to kind of mirror that CSA scoring. CSA kind of scores trucking companies based on those who are in your group, or your size. And it's a little bit like, I call it like, I'm from Iowa, the old Iowa Basic Skills Test. A kid that got a 50 on it was doing just fine. He was just a C student, going to pass. The guy getting 100 is really, really good. The guy getting 10 needs a lot of help. And so we want to kind of create that bell curve so we can really measure it. It was making it hard for us to measure because that bell curve was swung so far to the right that it looked like everybody was good, to a degree, except for the really bad guys who still would fall down at the bottom of the scale. So
Sure.
We
Sure.
think it'll spread out their numbers a little bit more. We don't have many 40s, right? But we had some 20s, okay? No 40s, and then everybody else is 60 or above. Well, when you get that big gap in the bell curve, we know something needs to be corrected, and that's that methodology that we're talking about changing. So
Sure. And it sounds like you've put a lot of thought and just headspace into it. And I thought it was funny, Dale, you sort of described me in high school when you said A, B student should be getting a C. That was me in high school for sure. I totally understand. I always thought their grading curves were a little bit messed up. But it's interesting to me. The one thing that you said that I've got to touch on here is that 97% of the fleet has had a 15 mile per hour or over speeding be observed. That is something I know that you guys are heavy on. And the last time, Dean, we had you on, we were talking about 6 to 10 miles an hour as far as the CSA score was concerned, kind of being the focal point here. So talk to me about the relationship, Dean, between the Samsara safety score and the CSA score, and what similarities and differences we're kind of looking at there.
Well, in both cases, the CSA and the Samsara scores both have elevated penalty when you get into the upper categories. As you move from the 5 to 9 to the 10 to 14 and 15 plus. So in the previous world with our Samsara scores, it wasn't really applying much of any penalty to the driver's overall score if they received or if they were noted as doing speeding violations in the 15 plus category, or even that 10 to 14. So those are areas that are drawing our concerns. We're trying to make sure that when we report back to our drivers with that CSA score, that we're giving them a good benchmark. We're not we're not fluffing the numbers, so to speak. When we have a speeding situation, we need to take ownership of it. We need to take ownership of the penalties that come along with that and make everybody aware. So, the only way you can get better is to be aware and make corrections. And this is going to provide everybody with that information to do that.
Absolutely. Denny, as a former driver, what's cooking around in your head right now when you're hearing us talk about and actually, before I go any further, I talked about this in the open. I'm saying Samsara. Dean, you're saying Samsara. Which one is it? I want to get it right so I don't sound like an idiot. Is it pronounced Samsara or Samsara?
It is actually pronounced Samsara. Samsara is in the Hindu world is life, death, and rebirth is what it stands for, and it's because of the ownership of the company. But it's actually pronounced Samsara, even though most people say Samsara or they kind of smear it all together. But it is Samsara.
Okay, well, thank you.
It's Indian terminology, I guess. So
okay, gotcha. Well, I'm glad that I've cleared that up because I've used both of them multiple times today.
As we all have, Marcus.
Okay, good. I'm not the only one guilty. Danny, over to you. What kind of questions do you have for Dale and Dean here concerning this?
A couple. First of all, since the focus is speeding, what I'm wondering is that the posted actual speed limit? And how does it keep up with that? Or is that just the 70 miles an hour you got the truck locked into?
No, that's with Samsara, what it does is they use Google Maps, Google Earth. There will be times, Denny, we found this out early on where it was screaming at the driver to slow down because he was driving someplace where the speed limit posted where he was at said 55, but somehow, Google hadn't updated it. It was 35, right? So there'll be a few false readings that we'll get, and we can go in and dismiss false readings. We can talk a little bit more about that when we talk about the cameras. But if we can go in and dismiss them, we go in and dismiss them. We don't want to punish drivers that aren't doing anything wrong. When Dean and I watch some videos, we go, well, the driver was perfect right there. Some car pulled out in front of it, right? So
right.
we can see those things. We can also see those readings. If a driver calls us and it's been yelling at them, we can dismiss those when we want to help their scoring or get accurate scoring, okay? But it is based off, most people, if they're running a GPS now, a newer GPS tells you what the speed limit is right where you're at. The cameras are supposed to read the road signs also, right? And so the camera reads the road sign and says, hey, that's the speed limit. If the driver's going 15 over the speed limit, that's when we get that event. those events, Dean and I have been doing a little research about this the last couple of days. Dean mostly, but me going, how in the hell do we figure these points out? But for them to get the speeding, they have to do it for 10 minutes, right, Dean? That's what it starts impacting the scoring, is 10 minutes of doing 15 plus, or 10 minutes of doing 6 to 10. It's not they hit it for 1 minute when they started down a hill, okay? It's something where they accumulate that time, and then they divide it by 10 kind of thing and say, okay, every 10 minutes of doing it, you get this many points. Dean, you could probably start talking about, I'm going to talk about the light speeding. If we have guys that are going 0 to 4 miles per hour to the speed limit, they're not punished in any way, shape, or form. We know that's going to happen. It's when we get to that 5 to 9 area. And again, Samsara is split up a little different than what the CSA does, right? CSA 6 to 10, Samsara's, 5 to 9, okay? They used to get 1/10 of a point deducted from their 100s. In other words, they'd be 99.99, okay, or 99.9 is what their score would be if they did that one time.
For 10 minutes.
For 10 minutes, okay? What we've done is we've changed that impact on that 5 to 9 to, 0.5, Dean? Is that what we decided on? So now it's a half a point, okay? So somebody who was perfect or at 99.9 and it always averages it out, he'd have been 100. Well, now he gets that 0.5. It probably still rolls him to 100, but if he does it twice, he drops to 90. And that it just keeps taking away points the more the drivers have unacceptable behavior. So those, we're concerned about those because that hits that 6 to 10 category. But there's 99% of our fleet goes, 6 to 10 over, or 5 to 9 over, however we want to describe that. For the heavy speeding, it used to be 0.8 of a point, and now we're making it 2 points for each one of those.
And that's between 10 and 14 miles an hour over, correct?
Correct. And then 15 plus, we're going from 1 point to 9.9 points. Okay, so if they're doing that much at all, they're no longer going to have a chance to be 85. They're going to be down, we're finding our problem children. That's what we're trying to do, is identify the problem children. Put the dunce hat on them, put them in the corner, let them know we mean business and we can't have them continuing to do that. Some of the interesting ones we had was a crash was 1 point before. We don't have that many crashes, so we moved that to 5 points. So if you've got a crash during the month, that's probably going to score a little bit higher. Following distance, okay? Following distance used to score nothing, 0. The way it was set up default, it didn't say anything. It just showed you a video of them doing it. That's a dangerous habit. So the plan is we bump that up to 0.1. Okay, and 0.1, because there's only, 16% mean of our drivers that are getting that, okay? That's going to impact them more, but we're still focused on speeding. These other ones, we've bumped them up a bit. Harsh braking again, used to be a half point, now it's 2 points. Harsh turn, half point, now 2 points. Rolling stops. Dean and I see these and just giggle at truck drivers who don't stop at stop signs. We giggle when they go through it at 7 miles an hour. We cringe when they go through at 21 miles an hour. We saw one of those, Denny. 21 miles per hour, a 4-way stop, just blows right around the corner. The only thing that slowed him down was turning, okay? Forward collision warnings was scoring 0 before. This is one where it says you're going to hit that vehicle. A forward collision warning is a kind of a hard one to describe without you guys seeing it, but pretend like you're going down a street someplace and the car in front of you doesn't put his blinker on to begin with, and he just starts hitting his brakes, okay? Then he flips his blinker on at the last second, and you realize he's going to be turning, and you're kind of coming at him. And if he decided to stop, you'd run into him, and you kind of go right behind his bumper when he turns. That's the kind of forward collision warnings we see with our drivers too. They pass doing that. They get a forward collision warning while passing. Okay, they get that run up on them, Denny. Right? They're running up on that truck in front of them, then they zip it out around them, and they're moving fast enough that they would collide with them. But we want to put a little more emphasis on that also. So Dean and I worked hard at this. We're not saying that we've got it perfect yet, but we're thinking it's going to give us a much better idea on the scoring. And hopefully the drivers listening out there, guys, know we're not trying to give you bad scores. We're trying to really spread it out to know who's the A student and who's the B student and who's the C and D and F. And that way we can go coach those D's and F's. We probably won't be bothering the C students a whole lot. But once we get all C students, well, then I guess we can improve by improving our C students. But it's still not phys ed. Not everybody's going to get an A. So
Sure. It kind of seems like the time you guys have been putting in is fitting this to H&M as a company rather than just having the one size fits all approach. And that's how you're going to get the best information out of it, I think, is by making sure that it does make sense for your fleet, not just for a fleet.
Yep.
Denny, you said you had 2 questions. We only let you ask one back there.
Oh, I got
wanna get
more
back to
now.
you. Okay, good. Hit them with them.
I'd like clarification on the 10-minute thing, because I'm just sitting there shaking my head. Is that like 10 minutes during your entire driving day, or is that a 10-minute in a row, or how is that 10 minutes?
It's an accumulative 10-minute time frame. So if you do it 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the afternoon, you got 4 minutes that day.
Okay, that clears that up.
we had that same question, Denny. We went right to Samsara and asked that question of our rep, which is, how is it counting the 10 minutes? Is it 10 minutes all together, or does it accumulate? So if a driver has, for instance, I don't know, I go that 6 to 10 category, and he's got 4 hours of that times 60, right? That's how many minutes he's been. Divide that by 10. That's how many points are going to start dropping off of his. And we'll catch those guys that continuously speed with that pattern. Yeah. So
I would assume if there was that much of the fleet doing 15 plus, and they were doing it for 10 minutes at a time in one stretch, you'd at least start to see your delivery times drop off. But I think that CSA score would probably follow that as well. So yeah, good to know exactly how. What else can we clarify for you, Denny?
The following distance. That's all theoretically well and good, especially out on the open road. You're driving through Montana or somewhere. That's easy to do. You get in Atlanta or Dallas traffic and people are constantly cutting right in front of you. How are you going to penalize a driver when he has little or no control?
This is actually the reason that we decided to have this today. Is this was the issue that drivers were wondering about. If somebody cuts me off, am I going to get nailed for following too closely on the Samsara safety score? That was verbatim. So please take us through that.
the answer is a big fat no, okay? They're not going to be penalized for that. So let me describe to you what it takes for them to get a following time violation. The Samsara system is designed to measure the vehicle speed in front of them, their vehicle speed, and find out what a safe distance is in between, or a reaction time for the driver to react, get on the brakes, and get stopped. And in their world, that's about a half a second. Think about how quickly your foot goes from the gas pedal or the accelerator to the brake pedal. Okay, you got to have a half second worth of time in there, otherwise you're probably going to hit that vehicle in front of you. Okay. Mm-hmm. The vehicle also has to be traveling at least 45 miles per hour. Okay, so when you're talking about in traffic, Denny, 45 miles per hour, well, most of the time the traffic's not bumper to bumper at 48 miles per hour. It's usually a little slower than that. But here's the last factor. They have to do that for a full 60 seconds in order for us to get an event. So if they get cut off in traffic, Denny, what do they need to do? Oh, just back up a little bit and put a little room in between, okay? That's all you got to do is brake suction every 60 seconds for that not to get those violations. That make sense?
It does, I'm sure. I'm just sitting here thinking, driving through Atlanta, you leave what is considered a safe following distance, and there's constantly going to be cars whipping in there, getting right in front of you. So I can see drivers may have a problem or an issue with this, but I get it for the safety. So
Yep.
it's a hard thing.
And think about, what Dale mentioned in Atlanta, chances of speeds in that kind of traffic above 45 miles an hour are not necessarily consistent. So that kind of removes that bumper to bumper traffic scenario. And above everything, we do have the ability to jump in and take action. As a safety manager or Dale or whoever is monitoring these things that come from Samsara, the system is not running the show here. We are running the show. So for instance, if I have a driver who is going down the road in the right lane, cruise on, doing everything right, somebody tries to merge in front of him and just, closes that gap and he has to hit the brakes. If I see that on the video, or I'm told that by the driver, I can go in and dismiss that event. I have the ability to throw it out of the pot, so we're not using that against the driver. Because I see many situations on a daily basis where, somebody. Well, I had one yesterday where our driver was right up here on Gomez, going to the four-way stop. They were sitting there. Everybody was taking their turn, but the car that was on their left, it went through the stop sign, and the car immediately behind it went right behind that car. Our driver started to go as that first car passed, but because it is so set car to hit the brake. In that case, I witnessed it on the video, so I dismissed it. So that scenario is not going to affect my driver at all, because we have that human element. We can see those things as they develop.
Well, and the other thing about the following time, Denny, I think that's important to mention is only 16% of our fleet ever gets one in the course of the month. Only 16% of the drivers. So we're not measuring it so tightly that it's happening on a regular basis. Dean and I probably see following time violations, maybe 3 or 4 a day. And sometimes it's the same driver, okay, that might have those 2 or 3 violations. They tend to be a tailgater. We get the repeat customers on that. So they're going to get a lower score. And then when we review their score with them and do some coaching, we can say, well, here's what happens. Denny, we understand in the big city those things are going to happen. But we see it happening on I-80 in Kearney, Nebraska, when there's no other cars around and they're just following the other big truck in front of them, I don't know, using them like NASCAR for some reason, and or they're doing the old snail race, can't get by each other, so they crowd each other to crowd the heck out of each other. The ones Dean and I really hate to see is when that's going on, you've got the slower truck trying to pass in the left lane, right? There's a truck in the right lane, so they're running right next to each other, and our truck is crowding the both of them in the left lane trying to pass them both, and it's just absolutely foolish. When you see it, it's the most dangerous looking thing you want to watch on a video, because one little thing, you can't see anything in front of them. From our camera angle, all you can see is 2 trucks. If there was a deer crossing the road or there's another wreck or the traffic slows down, they put themselves in a really bad spot. That's what we're trying to correct, Denny. We're not trying to catch all these little things that happen in the big city, because we know those are going to happen. And as Dean said, we can look at them, dismiss them, say, hey, he's just in a bad shape. Then you've run across 70 a million times in your life, right? You don't know which lane's the fastest, the right lane or the left lane, right? That's the craziest state in the world, going across Missouri.
Usually the one that's moving is the one that's fixing to close, right?
That's right. That's right. So again, we hope that this is going to help the drivers get a better understanding that this is just trying to rank them and say who's doing a really good job, we can pat them on the back. Who's doing a great job, we can pat them on the back. Who's doing a good job, and we can pat them on the back. And then those that are falling behind the curve a little bit, well, we can encourage them and show them and sit down with them and go over their numbers to help them realize that they're not only putting themselves in danger, but all the people around them. And, I always said if I was driving a truck, I'd pretend like every car was my wife, daughter, or grandkids. Okay? Yep. Notice I didn't mention my son. He'll get mad at me, but, I'll mention him now too. Okay?
No, it's a good point, and I think that bringing that up and actually discussing it, that we're not nitpicking here. We're not trying to increase the amount of violations that people have. We're just trying to outfit this so that it works for H&M, for the fleet that we have. And I love the human element of it, that the computers don't dictate every single violation. You guys actually get to go in there, take a look at it, make sure that it makes sense. And you're not just docking people points for the sake of doing that. You're really trying to get a good snapshot of how drivers are performing out there on the road from a safety standpoint.
Agreed. 100%.
Dean, anything else that you want to talk about from a safety standpoint here before we let you guys go? I just want to make sure everybody's got a chance. If there's anything else pertinent that we need to talk about here, we've got the time.
Well, I guess I'd be happy to share that today's the 26th of September. We've been 22 days without a speeding violation. We're doing good. Everybody's coming together, working together, and we're really bringing things around where they need to be. I'm extremely proud of the 22 days. I would love to do 52 days. I'll just keep the number going. I'm really happy because I like to see the positive change.
Yeah, I think the other thing I'd like to mention, guys, is pretty simple. We've got all these other events, that Denny talked about, or that the drivers worry about. And these, from following distance to harsh brakes to harsh turns to rolling stops, all those items, they're not very impactful to their total overall score. What's going to hurt their score is very simply speeding. If you're speeding, your score is going to come down. Speed and space is the biggest thing we can do in the trucking industry, because that's where accidents occur, is lack of space and too much speed. So that's the safest approach we can take. That's why we put the emphasis on the scoring on speeding.
Well, I think we can give a round of applause for that 22 days that Dean just mentioned. So I've got the applause button queued up for that. Great job, drivers. I mean, listen, we aren't just talking about this stuff to hear ourselves talk. I mean, we have these discussions for you. We know that they're, it's not always what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. And Dale, Dean, I appreciate you both for coming on here today. And clearing this all up for us. Denny, do you have any last questions you'd like to get in before we let the gentleman get back to work here?
No, just a couple of comments. I'm glad to know that they go in and review this, because that gives me peace of mind. I think it should the drivers, because you're not going to get nailed on every idiot that whoops out in front of you. Dean or safety department's going to go in and look at that and go, yeah, that wasn't the driver's fault. And the other thing is just a reminder, drivers know this, but it doesn't hurt to say it. Winter's coming, and especially up north, it seems like it takes that first storm, maybe two, before they go, oh, yeah, I remember how to do this. So just be careful.
Yeah. Be careful, be prepared. Get some non-perishables in the truck, get a couple extra blankets, some extra changes of clothes just in case. You can never be too careful as we see fall give way to winter here. And we'll definitely be talking about that in the future on the podcast as well, as the snow creeps down from the Great White North. Dale and Dean, really appreciate both of you guys' time today. Thank you so much for being here. We'll get you back on the next time we need to hear from you, okay?
Sounds great.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Great stuff there, Denny, from Dean and Dale. Always like it when those guys join us. And to get some clarification there on exactly how these numbers are calculated and what the Samsara is looking for. And there I go again, Samsara, excuse me. But I think that's just really important, and especially to get that clarification. You and I were just talking a little bit off the air about, how easy it would be to game this system if it were the way we thought it was, which is you have to speed at 15 over for 10 straight minutes before it gathers a point for you. That's not the way. It's cumulative over your entire day. We were thinking about the prospects of being able to speed for 9 minutes and 50 seconds and slow down for 10 seconds and then get back on it.
Yeah, well, we're like a bunch of kids. We try to figure a way around things.
Right. Just call me Bill Belichick. Where there's a rule to bend, I will bend it, okay? I found this Reddit post that made me laugh quite a bit, and I think you're probably going to laugh too, and maybe even have some additions that you can make to the post here. But this comes from Reddit user Roadstocks, and the post is called "You've been trucking too long when." He says, "I used to do these for other addictions, but they always worked pretty well, so here's a few to start. You've been trucking too long when you're on a family vacation and you get mad when your wife throws empty water bottles away." Yeah. I can't imagine.
Gatorade bottles.
I can't imagine trying to fill one of those up in front of my wife. I'm a little too bladder shy, but hey, I guess if you've done it from your driver's seat a million times, it's nothing to it. You can do that with kids yelling in the back seat.
I think you'd need a funnel.
How about this? You've been trucking too long when you try to Jake brake down a hill in your personal vehicle. You ever try to do that? Yeah, I'm sure you have. I have a feeling a lot of these are going to be very relatable to you, Denny, and a lot of them actually are. It's dealing with the personal vehicle. It's like something that's very, you guys are so familiar with being in a vehicle as a truck driver that when you get into your personal vehicle, it just feels like you're at work again. I'm sure of that. Maybe not as many bells and whistles, maybe not as big, but the instincts still lay where they always lay.
You almost drive into, scale house.
Yeah, exactly. That's another one
wait,
on here.
I don't have to go in there.
How about when you're home and you pull out the Pilot app to reserve a shower?
I haven't done that, no.
Haven't done that one? That's good. When you get to the grocery store with your wife in your personal car and you try to find a bill of lading before you go in. You ever done that one?
No, not
No,
that
no,
one.
okay.
Keep going.
How about when you're done putting groceries in your truck, you try to put on a seal on the trunk? I think that's kind of a cool idea. Just, you might as well do that, you know? Everybody walks around with a seal on the trunk. Why not? How about when you turn the wheel the wrong way when backing in your personal vehicle?
Yeah, guilty.
Yep. I'm even guilty of that, Denny. Way back when, my waning high school years, I was a parasail boat captain, and we had a 26 or 28-foot boat with a triple axle trailer that I would have to tow around and launch and trailer. And when I was doing that day in and day out, every single day, launching and trailering that boat and driving it down to the dock, I absolutely would get in my car and turn the wheel the wrong way to back out of my parking spot almost daily. It was something that even thinking about it, I couldn't keep myself from doing. So I totally get that. How about this? You know, you've been trucking too long when you're out and about in your personal vehicle and constantly look for empty lots, waysides, or truck spaces at odd hours and think, that would be a good spot to park if I was working.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about this? When you're in your car and you see a way station open and you almost pull in. I think you just mentioned that one, right?
Yep.
Have you ever actually pulled all the way in to a way station in your personal car?
But I've been close.
Yeah. How about this? You know you've been trucking too long when you pull the radio knob off trying to set your brakes.
No, but that's funny.
This guy says, I knew I'd been trucking too long when I started doing pre-trips on my car without even thinking about it.
Not a bad idea.
It's really not a bad idea, you know. We could definitely take some. How about this? When you swing wide for turns in your personal car, that's something that, that's another thing where it's like maybe just a little bit of a safety deal, right? You could be a little safer taking turns a little less tight in your personal vehicle.
Yeah, and stay in your lane at least.
Well, let's not get too crazy here, Denny.
It's like these idiots that come, you come to a four-way intersection and they cut it so close they trip the sensor on the side street so you catch the red light.
Yeah, okay. You know you've been trucking too long when you're climbing in the seat in an absolute panic, searching for the clutch pedal when coming to a stop in my automatic personal pickup truck. I have almost kicked a hole in the floor after driving a stick for a long time and then jumping into an automatic. I think that's something that happens to everybody that goes back and forth between them.
Yeah, well, my car and my truck they've got a clutch, so I don't have
that's
problem.
not an issue for you. Yeah. How about this? When you go home, you go outside to pee on the sidewalk instead of in your toilet.
No, thank you.
That's a pastime for some people, you know. I mean, I know guys that live out in the woods that would just as soon pee outside than go in the toilet because they live in the woods and they can.
You know, I get it keeping that emergency jug because you get stuck somewhere and there's a sign, especially since COVID, sorry, restroom's not available to drivers, and you've been there for 6 hours. So I understand keeping that Gatorade bottle or whatever, but as a general rule, it's not that far to walk into the Loves, you know?
Yeah, that's true. It really is true. But from what I've heard from drivers on this podcast and other podcasts that I do for other trucking fleets, is that a lot of those parking lots just smell like Bourbon Street in New Orleans. They're just, everybody is peeing outside.
Especially summertime.
Yeah, that's, oh God, gross. And thinking about the fact that there's times that you guys might have to get down on the ground and crawl underneath your trailer or crawl underneath your truck for certain maintenance or anything like that, and that's the ground that you have to crawl on, gross. Really gross. A couple more of these here. You know you've been trucking too long when you have the most inane dreams about parking the truck in a shitty situation. So you just going to sleep and it's all bad up there regardless of what happens, even when it's a dream and your brain's making it up. It's still putting you in a bad situation.
Or not making that appointment or that dock that was such a pain in the ass to get in. Yes, true.
Yep. How about when you crawl into bed, you reach down to turn on your inverter? Yeah. You know, a lot of these, Denny, I've been sitting here looking through them. That's most of the ones that are what I would consider safe for podcast content. The rest of them, they get a little bit down the rabbit hole, if you know what I mean. But you can head on to the subreddit r/truckers. If you're a Reddit user, there's about 300,000 users on that subreddit, and it's great for trucking content like this. And I've learned a lot, too. A lot of guys seek out help from other drivers there, ask questions. So I highly recommend you check it out. Once again, the subreddit is r/truckers. Any that spurred up in your mind, Denny, there before we get off here? You've been trucking too long, when?
No, same old thing I said, like pulling into scale houses and looking for truck stops, and you mentioned just about all of them that I would think of. Yeah.
Well, it's the life of a trucker. That's going to wrap it up here for us on episode 78 of the H&M Trucking Podcast. We appreciate everybody being here. And Denny, I don't know if you've gone and checked it out yet, but I've been heavy about plugging our new podcast website that just launched here recently. You can check it out by going to podcast.hmtrucking.com. There's a ton of cool stuff up there, including every podcast episode we've ever done, grouped by category. There's information on the guests that we've had. Drivers have shared pictures. There's some pictures up there on the website. We've got a pet of the month that we're featuring up there, so send in your pet pics. There's a spot for you to submit pictures right there on the main page for the website. So it's a really cool interactive place. And we've also got some of our top drivers, Denny, listed. Top miles for the month in Hopper, top miles for the month in Dry Van, idle time winners. All that stuff is up there. So make sure to go check out that website, Denny, if you haven't seen it yet.
Put that link on the YouTube thing, because that's where I watch it.
Okay, we'll get the link in the YouTube description for sure. And again, if you're just wanting to commit it to memory, podcast.hmtrucking.com. We'll be back here next week with another one of these, Denny. Anything else for us? I kind of ran out of stuff to say there. I know that's an anomaly.
No, you got to say that cheesehead thing. Bye, y'all. See ya.
Stay fresh, cheese bags.
Thank you for listening to the H&M Trucking Podcast. Please leave a review, subscribe, and connect with Marcus over at the H&M Trucking social media channels. And if you're considering a job at H&M, find us at hmtrucking.com. Until next time, stay safe and ahead of the curve drivers.